Performance consulting is all about figuring out what is causing the gaps in business performance and then making the best recommendation to close those gaps. And training is only one of several possible outcomes, but training can only solve problems that are caused by lacks of skills and knowledge. So any number of other factors impact performance on the job. I wanted to have that regular adult life, not even a glamorous adult life. And so finally one day I realized I couldn't do that. And my husband told me at the time, you didn't fail the profession failed you. And I remember that vividly, but I didn't understand it until a couple years later. You hear about opportunity sort of being the crossroads of luck and being prepared. And I've always tried to be over-prepared for every situation. So when those opportunity crossroads come up, then I can jump.
Why do you hire teachers for your team?
Because they are qualified for the job. Full stop. We are educators, and I think that's the place where corporate L&D misses the mark time and time again. We hire people who were really, really good at their job, the best engineers, the best developers, the best salespeople, whatever, and we put them in roles either managing others or training others, and they don't know how to manage, they don't know how to train.
If you had to choose between focusing on, as a priority, enabling people to deal with change and lead through change, and retaining top talent, and you had to focus on one of those, what would you do?
Wow.
I think it's terribly important to insist on individual values.
Learning Culture Podcast.
Initiative, creation, all these things which we value. It's now possible to make organizations on a larger scale than was ever possible before.
Learning Culture Podcast.
Teach people to analyze the kind of things that are said to them.
Laurel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
We were sharing a little bit before we started recording about building of momentum around the ideas that you're sharing in that session, the mini book pamphlet.
It's called a TD at Work. So ATD has a monthly series, TD at Work. They do 12 a year, so one a month. And I was the June 2023 guide.
Amazing.
Yeah, and so it's about 20 pages, and they all include job aids at the back. So there's a chance for practical application. So it's not just thought-provoking. You can then apply to your own setting.
Love it. And so we're going to get into some of these ideas. It's ideas that you're continuing to develop as well, right?
Thank you.
So you worked as a high school teacher in North Carolina, making $29,000 a year. You must clearly love teaching. How does being a teacher define you?
It's how I approach life. It's so interesting. One of the keynotes this morning at the ATD conference touched on the fact that surveys and polls have revealed we're all in this profession because we want to help people. And that's exactly why I'm here. And so I'm one of many who feel that way. And I became a teacher because when I was going through high school, like a lot of students, had really impactful teachers in my experience. And it's all I ever wanted to be from the time I was a child. That I was laser set focused on that. I'm from Detroit, came out of college in 2007. There were no jobs in Michigan in 2007. So 2008, it had been a year. I was itching to use my degree and just get out there and get that experience. And I applied to jobs in North Carolina because I heard there was a teacher shortage. I drove all night to get there. I had never been there before.
Amazing.
And the very first place I interviewed asked me 3 questions and hired me on the spot. I moved 2 weeks later and spent the next 6 years down there teaching. And it's just pivotal to who I am and why I do what I do, and just building relationships and helping people. And today, as a manager in a corporate setting, when I can help my employees realize their dreams and advance their careers, it's very much the same as what I was doing back teaching 12th graders who were going off to college.
Yeah, exactly. And how did you make that jump into L&D from teaching?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I did this about 10 years ago, and so I've been joking I did it before it was cool, because now coming out of COVID, there's such a huge movement, unfortunately, of teachers leaving the classroom, really for a lot of the same reasons that I left 10 years ago. But you referenced the salary. It's a public salary. I'm not shy about sharing the fact that I came in making $30,000. My first year, everyone in the state took a 1% pay cut, and I was frozen at $29,000 and change for the next 6 years of my life. And I wanted to do regular adult things. I wanted to buy a house, and I wanted to pay off my student loans. And I came out of college with $5,000 in student loans. It took me a decade to pay them off. And so I wanted to have that regular adult life, not even a glamorous adult life. And so finally one day I realized I couldn't do that. And my husband told me at the time, you didn't fail the profession failed you. And I remember that vividly, but I didn't understand it until a couple years later. And so I left teaching and I just thought, well, I was an English major. I was an English teacher. I'm a good writer. I'm a good editor. That's got to be valuable to somebody, but I don't know what you do with this.
Yeah.
And so I became a secretary at the University of North Carolina.
Okay.
And I, in my secretarial role, worked the front desk of a doctor's office. And I loved it, but I knew it wasn't a career. I wasn't really sure what was right, what was next. And my husband ended up getting into grad school at Michigan. That brought us back home to Michigan. And then I found instructional design. I was really by chance. I was looking for jobs anywhere, everywhere, doing anything I could possibly just get employment doing. And I found a place hiring for what they called a training and development specialist. They had me teach a lesson during the interview, which is funny because I never once facilitated live training once they hired me, but that was part of the interview process. I did it. I got the job. The rest is history.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So much of what you just described with this, like driving through the night to North Carolina, then just like throwing yourself into 6 years of that, there's like an element of like you just never look back on these things, right? You just like you just get like what do you think drove you?
I had to, honestly, like no one else is going to do it for me. And part of that is environmental and like the political nature of just coming out of college in 2007 and the recession and the Detroit and the Rust Belt and all of that.
Yeah.
And then part of it is I'm the first person in my family to go to college. And so nobody was holding my hand. Nobody was really showing me the way. And I didn't want to be a waitress the rest of my life. I had a college degree and there was only one way to use it, and that was to leave, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's, I mean, this is, wow. Like, I think this is such a great, this is a great story. And it has so many lessons to the stuff that I talk about, I mean, and focus on leadership. But, obviously you're probably in the same in your role. This idea of like no one's going to do it for me, so there's like an agency, right, that you felt and you've kind of exhibited, I guess, throughout your career, right? Do you appreciate how difficult that is for some people?
I do, honestly. When I was teaching in rural North Carolina, a lot of my students were the first in their family to graduate high school. And I talk about being the first in my family to graduate college. High school was a given for me. I knew that one was going to happen. And so I absolutely do appreciate, I mean, just the generational cycles of poverty. And it's so interesting, just thinking about how where you're born and the environment you're born into has so much impact on what's possible for you in your life. And some people are able to, and it's not always meritocracy, honestly. It's not always merit-based, but you hear about opportunity sort of being the crossroads of luck and being prepared. And I've always tried to be over-prepared for every situation. So when those opportunity crossroads come up, then I can jump.
Yeah, and I guess that was the reason I asked the question is that you kind of alluded to there's always somebody that's worse off, and just recognizing that and not falling into the victim mentality, right? That was the other thing, and I had a question on here about you had shared with me before how you'd kind of worked up from that first role you mentioned at SAP Concur and how you've kind of now moved into a leadership position. And my question on that was around, how did you ever feel like you entitled to those things because of the preparation and the hard work and that, or did you ever feel that? Entitled
is a tricky word. I wanted it really, really bad.
Yeah.
And I knew I was capable, and I felt like I was deserving.
Yeah.
I've never felt entitled, and I hope I never do, honestly.
Yeah.
But one of the lessons that I've learned from many mentors and coaches in my life is personal brand. And it's kind of a cliche, it's a buzzword, but honestly, there's so much truth to that when you're applying for any job, especially with strangers or even with people who know you, as I was when I became a leader, I was applying to lead the team that I had previously been a member of, but it wasn't a given that I was going to get it. There was other candidates internally and externally going for that role. And someone said, it's really incumbent on your personal brand, how others see you, and can they envision you doing that work? And so I knew I was capable. I felt like I was deserving, but then it just became this question of how can they see me in this role?
Yeah. Yeah, and how intentional were you about that, I guess? Or like, what can you give some examples of how that was?
I was incredibly intentional. This is going back to that being overprepared, honestly, and like working double hard just to try and get there. So a couple things. One of the peers who I'm now a peer of, but he was a leader in this organization before me, asked me during the interview process, well, do you have any previous leadership experience? And I think he thought the answer was going to be no, because he knew I was just an instructional designer the last couple years.
Right.
And I said, well, actually, yes, I do. And I talked about teaching, and you have this caseload of 120 students, and you're absolutely a leader to them.
Yeah.
But then I also talked about outside of work for the last several years, I've been volunteering on the board of directors for my local ATD chapter, the Association for Talent Development. There's chapters in every major city across the U.S. And I wanted to be a leader. I wasn't getting that experience at work. So I volunteered for a couple years on the board of directors, and I became the president over time. So I'm doing all the things leaders do. I'm coaching others, developing them, setting a budget, setting a mission and vision, adhering to national standards and doing reporting, like all of these things. And I talked about that in my interview, and he said, oh, I had no idea you were doing that. And I'm just thinking in the back of my head, it's on LinkedIn. I post about it. But they didn't know I was doing that. And I think that changed the course of my interview, where they realized, oh my gosh, she actually has been a leader before. But then it's also that pitfall of, if you haven't done it, no one thinks you can do it. So then you don't get the job, and that's another vicious cycle.
And also how you had to almost like reframe it for people, and even if they had seen it maybe on LinkedIn, like maybe not have appreciated how you were leading, and like this, the transferability of those skills and stuff. So there's like that also, like being explicit basically, right, about all of this. This, by the way, fun fact, in this series that we've been recording here in New Orleans, you're the third ATD chapter president that we've talked to. So really, really cool. Was it the Michigan?
Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Yeah.
So Michigan has 3 chapters. There's Detroit, Ann Arbor, and Western Michigan, and we're in Ann Arbor.
Okay, awesome. Are you still involved in the?
I am. Yeah, I'm not on the board anymore. So I was the VP of membership, and then president-elect, then president, then past president. That was a good 4 or 5 year run. So I always say I'm their #1 volunteer, but I'm not on the board anymore.
Nice. That's awesome. Okay, so let's talk about the stuff that's in your book, and the ideas that you're talking about here. Why do you hire teachers for your team?
Because they are qualified for the job. Full stop. And I can elaborate on that, even though I just said full stop.
Mic drop.
Thank you. So they have degrees in education. We are educators. It doesn't matter if our audience is grown adults in the workplace doing whatever job they do. We are educators. And I think that's the place where corporate L&D misses the mark time and time again. We hire people who were really, really good at their job, the best engineers, the best developers, the best salespeople, whatever, and we put them in roles either managing others or training others, and they don't know how to manage. They don't know how to train. And there's very much a science to being an educator. There's literally theories that people go to school and get entire degrees in, and educators have that knowledge. And there's very much an art to what we do, just the creativity and the passion. And educators bring that in multitudes. And I made the transition successfully myself. I've hired many teachers, higher education, staff people doing that type of work, and they've come to my team and they've thrived. And I've had recruiters challenge me on this, and I've had recruiters literally say to me, are you sure you want to hire them? They've never worked in big tech. Oh, they've never had a corporate job before. And that doesn't matter. They can come here and they learn the job, but also we have subject matter experts. So we can rely on them for the company knowledge, but the educators bring the knowledge of the theories, how to make engaging, effective content, how to make it measurable, how to align to an organizational goal. That's something that's harder for me to teach when they get there. We can teach them about the company. That's easy to learn.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we look at that when we go in and work with companies as well, as we try to bring that beginner's mindset, right? And it's like figuring out what to do with the content. Like that's in a subject matters expert's head. I want to go back to, you mentioned creativity and passion as 2 things. Like there's knowledge, creativity, passion. Those are, do you have any examples to bring those to life? Because I think that's so important for people to appreciate, that there is a creative, there's an art to educating, to taking people on a journey, to changing behavior, right? And it also needs, and I think those 2 are so close together, that passion and that creativity. Like, you've got to care about this, you know. And
Yeah.
Can you share some examples of that?
We just rolled out a new sales methodology here at work, and it's all about how to prospect and how our sales development representatives can really partner closely with the account executives to making sure they're prospecting the right types of targets and clients, to make sure they're not crossing lines and everyone's bombarding the same clients to the point of annoyance. And how do we prioritize effectively swim lanes for the different clients that we're trying to sell to? And so everyone internally just keeps using a fishing metaphor. How do you know if you're fishing in the right pond? What bait do you use? If you're fishing side by side with your buddy and you're both casting lines, how do you make sure the lines don't get crossed? And so we have all these fishing metaphors baked in. And so 2 members of my team literally made little 5-minute micro-learning videos using fishing as all the metaphors I just described. And we watch these little cartoons. We have this wonderful rapid development animation tool that we use. And you watch these little cartoons of people sitting in boats and they're fishing, they're casting their lines, they're pulling in the big fish and they have the right bait. But it's telling the story of this sales methodology. And that's the creativity of my team and just the fun way that they approach their work. They wanted to make these fun little videos. And all the sales leaders are telling us that this is actually landing and being really effective because of those fishing videos.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's so like, the power of that type of video is that it gets the conversation. The most important part is the conversation, right? Not the video, but the video initiates that, right? And gets people thinking about it and like, oh, yes, okay, I understand that lines could cross and that's causing a problem for these 2 fishermen, right? So like, and then can quickly translate that into their world and then now have a mental model for thinking through solutions to that, right? I think that's beautiful. And how do you facilitate that discussion part? I feel like to like complete that learning circle, what do you do there?
We do a lot of upfront analysis, and we get a lot of pushback on that because it slows us down. But there's really value in doing the upfront analysis of making sure there's a business goal in place, because why are we creating training? We're not being good stewards of the company's time and resources if we're creating training that's not clearly tied to advancing some business goal. You'd be surprised how many requests or outright demands for training we get, and we ask the requester, well, what business goal are you supporting? And they don't know. Or they can't clearly articulate a measurable KPI. You know, we hear more sales, more sales, more sales as a rallying cry. Okay, well, what does that look like? Are we talking number of units? Are we talking market growth, percentage?
You need specifics.
And they don't know. So we always do that upfront analysis to make sure that there actually is a business goal in place. And then we use a technique called action mapping to really align to behaviors on the job, because everyone by this point in our careers has experienced really boring training, and we don't want the reputation of the people who make the really boring training. So we action map it, where we connect the business goal to the on-the-job behaviors to meaningful practice. And so we actually have them during training not just be passive. And in those 5-minute videos I said, you're passive, you're watching a video, but it's 5 minutes.
It's just starting the thinking, right?
Exactly. You know, so when we do something that's 30 minutes, 60 minutes, a full day, or a program onboarding that spans 90 days, we make sure we really have them do hands-on practice of the things they're going to do on the job. Especially for salespeople, if you don't have them practice during training, they'll either never do it at all, and then you wasted everyone's time, or they'll practice on the customers, and you don't want them practicing on the customers.
No, exactly. So you're creating that environment for this to happen, and for them to iron out all the creases.
Yes.
All of that, all right, so let's go back to this, the A-list L&D team. As we were kind of flipping through this before we were talking, the roles caught my eye, and you've clearly kind of thought through these different roles that you need to have, and kind of what skills they should have. Which one of these do you think is kind of the most like interesting, or sort of maybe ones that people haven't thought about as much? We can talk more about that one.
So instructional designer, clearly ubiquitous. It's a whole entire industry. What's really unique is how every company approaches instructional design. There really isn't regulation or standardization in our industry, and every company does it differently. Some people call it instructional design, learning experience design, instructional systems design, and job descriptions have a huge discrepancy from place to place, team to team, of what an instructional designer actually does. And so I think as the leader, it's our responsibility to have clarity around that role. What role does this person need to do to drive the business forward in this unique setting? And then when you're hiring, a couple things I always recommend, even before you hire, have a mission and vision in place for your team. Really understand what unique value does my team bring and serve in this larger organization. Do a SWOT analysis. It's very tried and true and old school, but seriously, understand your strengths, your weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So then when you do hire, you have that awareness of, well, what are the current strengths that we've got covered? But we have gaps over here. And when I bring someone new into that team, I can bring in a new skill set or a new perspective or diversity of thought. And so where instructional designers can sort of be jacks of all trades, you might also want to branch out into whether it's an L&D specific role or maybe even a non-L&D specific role. My wider department just brought in data analysts. Well, we're a learning organization, but the data analysts belong here. They're really helping us demonstrate our value and track that alignment to those business KPIs that I spoke about. And so especially if your team is the only learning team in your wider organization, there's actually a lot of wisdom in branching out and considering roles outside that traditional L&D skill set to really round out the L&D function and show that value back to the business.
That is interesting, and I think it's easy to kind of hire someone in a role like instructional design and almost expect them to start to do other parts of this, right? Like people can't see what I'm pointing at here, but let's talk about one example, because I think about this in my own business as well with the learning architects that we have. How do you distinguish between an instructional designer and a performance consultant?
That's a really great question. When I think instructional design, I think ADDIE, which is a huge process and could become 5 different jobs, honestly. But with the instructional designers, you could have them be that jack of all trades. They analyze, they design, they develop, everything. Or you could really drill into one area or another. My designers really tend to focus on the design and the development. Some places go even more specific where they're just designing or they're just developing. And there's really a lot of wisdom in that also, because when you're looking for that jack of all trades, it's impossible to find one person who can do the analysis, do the project management, do the stakeholder relationship, design the content, the writing that goes into the designing, then the development. They know all the tools, and we work in video and PowerPoint and Adobe and e-learning, and so it's impossible to find one person who has all of those skills. And so being really crystal clear on, again, what is the gap in your team, what niche do you need to serve, and then protecting that role clarity once they get there, because scope creep is so dangerous. Honestly, it burns everyone out, and having role clarity across both your team and across your wider organization really keeps everyone happy and performing to the best of their abilities.
I couldn't agree more. I guess maybe as another idea or question related to this, what idea would you like people to start to think differently about? Like what's contained in here? And also we'll talk more about the future in a minute, like where you want to take these ideas, but what's an idea in here that you really want people to engage with as something that's maybe challenging what currently gets done?
If you, as an individual or as a leader, if you want to be part of a really great team, it's incumbent on you to make that vision a reality. And that takes a lot of critical thought, and that takes a lot of intention. And I mean, going back to what you and I talked about a few minutes ago, kind of in my own life journey, having that vision and realizing it's on you to make that happen. No one's going to do it for you.
Agency.
Yes.
And that's, so do you find that the people that are engaging with the ideas in here are people that are building L&D teams themselves, or part of teams looking around like, hey, how do we split this workload? How do we, what's the target audience, I guess, for this?
It's such a great question, because ATD asked me the same thing when I was publishing through them. Who's your target audience? And I thought a couple people. I thought people who, quite frankly, are just like me. They rose up through the ranks, designer to now leading a team of designers. And maybe they have the L&D expertise, but leadership is new for them. And how do I uniquely lead an L&D team? Because you can go in any bookstore in America, and there's no shortage of books on business business management, business leadership. You can find a smaller number of books on L&D, but that niche of L&D leadership doesn't quite exist. And so I'm writing that for people, but not just like myself. What about the L&D leader who doesn't have the L&D background? They came from somewhere else in the business and now they're leading the L&D team. I've seen a number of those. That happens a lot. Yeah. And to them, I would really encourage them to read up on L&D and get to know the basic vocabulary and framework and learning theories that make your work so much more impactful than just going on gut instinct. Also, what about aspiring leaders? People who want to hold the role someday and they're not sure. They're feeling imposter syndrome or any number of reasons that are holding them back. I wanted to give them a toolkit that could make them feel confident and ready to move into that role.
And what do you think is the biggest challenge someone who, and especially that role, that when someone gets kind of brought in to lead the function because they're a leader from another part of the business, that happens so much, and they don't maybe have that educational background, maybe not even the passion, creativity and stuff that sort of comes from that. What's a big mistake that people like that make when they're assembling a team?
Misunderstanding that L&D not only can be, but should be a really strategic business partner. And I think this is something that even tried and true L&D professionals sometimes get wrong. We always talk about the business, and I'm doing air quotes around the business, because we talk about them as if we're not part of them. And especially when you're a leader, you're a business leader. L&D does not make you not part of the business. You're making business decisions every single day. Human resources decisions, hiring and firing on your team, how to spend resources, how to use your precious budget, things like that. You're making business decisions every single day. And I think that we do ourselves a big disservice by thinking about ourselves as being outside the business. The other side of the coin is the business doesn't always understand the value we bring. I've been on a mission for the last several years to convince everyone across the business, hey, my team is an equal partner to you. My team can support your goals. When you have your vision, here's how my team can enable that vision to come into reality. And we're making progress getting there. But I still hear at least once a month, well, can't you just make this PowerPoint look pretty? And that really minimizes the impact that we can have.
Exactly. Can you share some examples specific to SAP Concur around that idea of this is how my team supports that business vision?
Absolutely. I had the great fortune actually recently that Concur invested in us to pursue certification through ATD, and it's called Master Performance Consultant. And so we had touched a bit on this previously, so I'll go back and give a better answer now around what a performance consultant does. You really focus on that analysis. And so we had a business leader come to us a couple months ago and say, hey, our sales teams are using 3 different digital tools. One is essentially microsites. It's a customer-facing website. It's a little mini website, and there's metrics on it. Are they engaging? And you can put customer-facing content there. Tool 2 was a video tool, and then 2.3 was sort of a database tool. And he came and said, we need training. So I think that's a hot topic number 1. We need training.
Do you really?
And they wanted training on all 3 tools equally. So thank goodness this request coincided with my team going through this certification on how to be a performance consultant. And so for the certification, there's a pass-fail element where you take the coursework, and then you have 90 days to actually go do a real live consulting project with a real live business, and then you submit your report to ATD, and then you either pass or fail. So one of my employees got assigned to this project on the digital tools training, and he's going through the process and talking to the high performers to really get to the secrets of what are the keys to their success? What are high performers doing differently that the lower performers aren't? And what he realized is that all 3 tools weren't having an equal impact. The high performers were using one tool so much more and having so much measurable success. We can pull the metrics around customer engagements with this tool, and and the correlation to sales and closed-won deals and all of that. And high performers were using one tool almost exclusively, and the middle and lower performers were spreading thin between 3 tools or using the other 2 a little bit more. So we came back to the stakeholder, brought him this insight. He had no idea this was happening. He canceled the request, and we did enablement on the one tool. And we're seeing a huge just increase in everything and productivity all around the use of this one tool. And that's a big win story for my team. And that project has garnered so much attention. We now have other stakeholders coming to us and say, can you figure that out from me. Help me with my problems like that. Yeah. So no more PowerPoints.
Yeah, that's a great example of this. And I'm curious about the process of that. So was that a lot of interviews and then a lot of synthesis of that information? What else? What did
it
that look
really
like?
is, yeah. And so performance consulting is all about figuring out what is causing the gaps in business performance and then making the best recommendation to close those gaps. And training is only one of several possible outcomes. So if they lack skills or knowledge, insert training. But training can only solve problems that are caused by lacks of skills and knowledge.
Yeah.
So any number of other factors impact performance on the job. Could be lack of motivation, could be lack of managerial support, could be issues with the tools.
Exactly, yeah.
And in this exact scenario, we found out 2 of the 3 tools really weren't doing what we needed them to do. So our sales reps are a lot less productive when they're spending time using the wrong tools for what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
And so all of this by really interviewing the key performers and their managers and getting to the heart of what are the outcomes they're expected to do on the job, what barriers they face in achieving those outcomes. So again, lack of motivation, lack of support, lack of knowledge, and then looking at what facilitates their performance, what actually helps them. Then we can make the best recommendation, whether or not that's training.
Yeah, it's always... throughout my career, it struck me that there's this disconnect, right, between what's actually happening on the ground and what leadership perceives. And I now experience this as a leader myself for my company. There's almost nothing you can do about that as a leader. You're not the one doing that work. So this is a tough question, right? But how can leaders think about bridging that gap and making sure that they are keeping a pulse on things?
I think it's really that simple. Keep a pulse on things.
Yeah.
Be connected to your team. I lead a permanently remote team. We're scattered all across North America. We've met one time since COVID in person. But I think that my team is very connected. We do a lot of our calls camera on. That's our default. And so we're having that eye-to-eye contact, even if it is through a Zoom call. Right. We have one-on-ones every single week. And that time is sacred to me. And I always tell them, if you don't have anything, you can cancel. But I don't cancel those calls, even when I'm not bringing anything in. I want that FaceTime. I want that connectivity. And I always ask them, how are your projects going? Where are you stuck? Where can I help you? And it's not about checking up on them, because I can see the proof is in the pudding. They're showing up to their meetings. They're getting their jobs done. I can see all the outputs that they're putting out there. Right. But I want to know, where are they struggling? Where are they succeeding? Who's helping them? And so because
that almost like systems view of it you can double down on something that someone's doing really well, right?
Yes.
And then have others be able to adopt that behavior, and same thing with something that might be done not that efficiently, and how do you remedy that? So I think that's great. What you mentioned when we were having a prep call about basic skills like writing, reading, critical thinking. Let's start to talk about that now as you look at Concur as an organization, your responsibility there as a learning leader. How are you thinking about those basic skills and I guess evaluating where people are in them and also enabling them?
Writing is so fundamentally important, honestly. So much of what my team does really hinges on good writing. We write e-learning courses, whole entire paragraphs. We write documents. We, of course, write PowerPoints. We write scripts for videos. And a lot of the material that we get from our subject matter experts isn't necessarily well written. It's people's notes. It's notes that we've taken during phone calls with them. And so it's really our job to transform this hodgepodge of ideas from any plethora of sources into something concise and compelling and engaging, and then actually effective at leading to behavior change. And all of that relies on critical thinking and analysis and writing. And those are skills that I look for when I hire, and those are really hard skills to suss out through just a short interview process. Do people have these skills or not? So one of the things that I do when I hire instructional designers, I require portfolios of work samples. And I put this right in the job description, portfolios required. I only interview candidates who have portfolios, and I literally look for quality of writing, quality of thought. I look for reflection. I love to see see, beyond just the mechanics of, grammar and things like that, just, is their copy interesting to read?
Yeah.
Are their videos compelling to watch? Am I engaged watching their work samples? Because if I'm bored, or if it looks like it was built in the 90s and everything's gray, I'm out. I'm not hiring this person. And so I look for that. And one of the strongest designers on my team actually has a master's in creative writing and a bachelor's in journalism.
Oh, that's awesome.
She has a certificate in instructional design, but her degree is focused in these other areas. And as she was going through her interview process, she had to go offline for 2 weeks because she was invited to go to this writer's retreat off the coast on this island, somewhere, and invitation only. And she was basically off the grid doing a writer's retreat for 2 weeks. And she said, "I'm so sorry, I can't interview for the next 2 weeks. Is that all right?" And I said, "Yes."
Yeah.
And I got pushback from the recruiter, and she said, "Oh, are you sure this person's worth waiting for?" And I'm like, "This is who we need
exactly
to hire.
what I want. Yeah.
The people who write for fun.
For
this
2
is
weeks,
this is who we need to hire."
Yeah, totally.
And she's been with my team 4.5 years, and
Amazing.
she was just our top performer, recognized by leadership last quarter. She's incredible.
Yeah. I love this topic because I couldn't agree more about the importance of writing. One of the things I'm obsessed with right now with my team, and I kind of I got this idea through many ways, but really crystallized for me. There's a book called On Writing by William Zinsser. So good. Like, there's so many good writing books out there, right? Strunk and White, and I think Stephen King has a great one as well, like his memoir. But this one is just so good, and it is so, one of the central things I've learned from it is simplicity, right? Saying things simply, say what you mean. Like, simple as writing in the active as opposed to passive, right? Little things like that. But just, I'm now obsessed with this. So when I write something, I will then go back over it, especially if it's like an email, to a client or a LinkedIn post or whatever. And I'm like, how can I now say that more simply, right? Curious what your take on that is, because it's a difficult process, something that I'm learning for myself still. I'm trying to instill this in my team as well, so that there's no verbosity, in the communication. Like, we get taught to do that. Like, we get taught to write, and like, it's weird. Like, no one speaks like that. So why are we writing like that, right? Like, what's your take on that?
That is such an interesting question. I'm long-winded by nature. Like a lot of people, it's harder for me to write something short than it is to write something long.
Totally, right? It's that, like, I'm sorry I wrote you a long, what's that thing? Like, I'm sorry I didn't have time to write you a short letter or something like that. So,
Right.
Yeah.
And the more I get out there, and I've presented at a few conferences lately, and I've written a few articles lately, and I keep trying to turn my articles into conference presentations, and then I find myself reading these long sentences, and I think, this doesn't work when I say it out loud. It worked when it was printed.
Yeah,
It doesn't work when I say it out loud.
Yeah. But I think readers are, I speak from my own experience. Like, I want to read something that can be said out loud. You know what I mean?
Right. And
yeah.
especially for an international audience too. And so,
Yeah,
like I
that's also-
mentioned, my team is scattered across North America, but we're a global company. We support a global audience. Most of our content is delivered in English. We actually don't translate very much, but we are supporting a global audience. The majority of the people consuming our content are not native speakers of English. And so we have to be very careful. Everything you're saying, clarity, conciseness, not using idioms, not using American references, things like that.
Yeah. It's tough. Do you do any, like, formal or informal training on writing, like, specifically for your team?
I actually haven't. And I don't exclusively hire English majors, but more than half of my team have degrees in English.
That's the background there. Really.
I've been joking that I'm going to start a podcast called English Majors Who Have Real Careers, and I probably won't ever do that. But I love finding an English major in the wild who's actually out there and has a real career.
Yeah, well, heads up, anybody listening who knows one, definitely get in touch with Laurel. Okay, so I could talk about writing forever, but that's not that. Let's go back to Concur, and what are some of the top initiatives, priorities that you're focused on right now?
Great question. We are actually doing a lot of change management, as with everyone. We've had the great fortune, they invested in a ProSci certification for us, and so now we all have the change management toolkit and all the vocabulary, and it's so interesting. We learned the ADKAR methodology, ADKAR, and It's awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement.
Yeah.
And each one of those steps is like a gate. And if you haven't done the steps before, you can't skip one, you can't hop over that gate. And notice that awareness and desire are the first two. And so many times we try and just steamroll out change. There's directions from on
straight
high.
to knowledge, right?
Oh,
Just-
yeah. You know, and this is the way it's going to be, and everyone just jump to it.
Yeah.
Here's the new marching orders.
Yeah.
And if your teams, if your people don't have that desire for the change, that's it. You can't skip that step. That change is not going to be realized. And that was such a light bulb for me, just as a leader and honestly as an employee. I start to think about my own behavior. Oh, that's why I was so resistant. I didn't really want to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I always think about when we're delivering a message, not only what is the message, but how do we deliver in a way that we're winning over hearts and minds and actually getting folks to desire. And that goes right full circle back to the quality of the writing, the quality of the message, the content of the message, and a measurable learning objective. Right back to that,
Totally,
you know.
yeah.
And people on the job are learning so they can use it on the job.
Yeah.
When I was teaching high school 15 years ago, you know, the goal is you're going to use this someday.
Yeah.
Someday you'll be glad you read Shakespeare when you were in ninth grade English.
Yeah.
But today, everyone I'm teaching, they have to use it today,
Right.
or they have no desire to learn whatever it is I'm saying.
Right. And I was talking about this with the previous guest. It was this idea of that desire so getting people to kind of understand the change and then really like figure out like, do I want to opt into this or not, right? Like kind of
Yes.
going back to agency as well, right? Like you don't have to stay here, right? Like kind of that attitude. This has changed. Like let's discuss it, let's understand it, but then ultimately it's your choice. And if you want to leave, that's okay, you know. Yeah, how do you think about facilitating those kind of conversations?
Yeah. We try and give our learners as much agency of choice as possible. And this could be as simple as not restricting navigation through an e-learning. How many times have you done really boring, probably compliance training, and you are locked in, and you can't hop around, you can't choose your own adventure, you can't fast forward through those videos. And so we try to give our learners as much agency as choice as the stakeholders who review and approve the content will let us give them. And that could be everything from, hey, there's 5 topics we're going to cover. You pick which order you want the 5 topics in. Or, hey, can we build a pre-test? And if they took this exact same training last year, can they test out next time? And if they pass the test, can they skip the training next time? And as adults, again, we're all busy. People don't love taking training on the job. And if you can give them that autonomy of choice to opt in, opt out, and just have a little sense of control, that sense of autonomy, they'll appreciate it a lot more. And when they appreciate it more, they're going to engage more and retain more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love that. The autonomy of choice in learning is so important. It for that desire part, right? The D there. Okay, so if you had, I'm going to give you like a scenario here. If you had to choose between focusing on as a priority, enabling people to deal with change and lead through change, and retaining top talent, and you had to focus on one of those, what would you do?
Wow. I hate to see those two things at odds because they both feel so mission critical.
Yeah.
So change or retaining top talent. You know, the only constant in life is change, but I'm a people person. I got to go with the people here for this one. It's such a business trope that people are our number one asset, but my goodness, they are. You know, and I say this as someone who, at this point in my life, has not experienced a layoff personally, but I've seen it happen around me at a couple different employers in my career. It's just an agonizing experience for everyone impacted and for everyone else around them. And so when you have top talent, if you can hang on to them, that's an investment in the health of your business. That's an investment in every business goal you set for yourself. And retention is so critically important because turnover not only comes at a really high cost to just productivity and all that, but turnover comes at a really high cost to morale.
Yeah.
When you lose your work bestie, you know, when that person that you're so used to seeing every single day isn't there anymore for any number of reasons, you start questioning things for yourself. Do I still want to be here? Or what's the future for me here?
Yeah.
And so an investment in our people is literally an investment in the health of the business.
Yeah, I think, and And what are you doing at Concur? What initiatives are you trying to help with this?
Yeah. I'll go back to an answer I shared a little earlier. I really try and get to know my team as people. And so who are they as people? And as much as they're willing to share, what do they do outside of the work? What drives them? And why are they here? What led them here? What do they want to get out of this experience? You know, do they want to focus more on learning a specific tool or gaining a specific skill or building a relationship with a certain part of the business? And as much as I can align their projects with their interest, it's such a win-win for everyone because they're so much more engaged. They have so much stronger retention. And it really just fosters this environment that we all want to be in because we're genuinely invested in being here and doing this work together.
I love that. I love that. All right, final question then, Laurel. What is next for you professionally, personally, organizationally, wherever you want to go with that? And what value do you want to embody going into that?
Well, thank you. It was so funny. I was at this conference, the ATD conference 2 years ago, and somebody asked me that question, and I didn't have a what's next. And it hit me for the first time in my career, I'm actually exactly where I want to be.
Yeah, that's a good...
I'm so fortunate, and I really genuinely love my job. So I don't have a what's next in that sense.
Yeah.
But someone asked me that, and I'm ruminating on it, and I'm walking through the bookstore, and I just thought, boy, this is the English teacher coming out on me, but I would love to see a book with my name on it for sale here someday.
Yeah.
And so I have started the slow journey because at this point I'm not under contract for a book, so it's on my own timeline.
Yeah.
But I've started the slow journey of writing a book, and I started actually with my TD at Work guide that ATD published, and you know, those ideas may grow up to be a book someday.
Yeah.
So coming not soon to a bookshelf near you, someday we'll have a book on this topic.
I love it, and you're doing everything that you need to do now, which is getting out there, having conversations like this, doing presentations, publishing this already, so I mean, good luck in the journey. What value do you want to embody going through this?
Humanity.
Oh, nice.
You might notice I didn't mention AI this whole entire time. That's probably the first time in 6 months we've gone an hour and not talked about AI.
That's true. Almost every conversation so far.
Yeah. Honest to goodness. I'm not against it. I'm not a detractor. But we're humans. We show up at work as humans, and so much of leadership is just showing up as a good human for the people who have put their careers and their well-being in your hands. So humanity.
I love that. That's a great answer. Laurel, thanks so much for coming to join me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was an honor.
Hello. I hope you enjoyed that episode. It's Andrew again with a quick message. If you'd like to support the show, the best way to do that is to leave us ratings and reviews where you listened. If you're on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe buttons, and feel free to leave a comment. We love hearing from our listeners and viewers. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please take the time to give us a rating and leave a review. Once again, we love hearing from our loyal listeners. If you're listening to this on Spotify, please hit the follow button to make sure that you don't miss new episodes as they come out. See you next week for another episode of the Learning Culture Podcast. Thank you for listening.